Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning, where we react to the Sunday morning shows that we watch so that you don't have to. I'm Katie Halper.
And I'm Aaron Maté. Hey, everybody. Happy Monday morning. Good Monday morning.
And good Yontif to those of you who celebrate. I don't remember if it's Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah.
It's the Kips. I can confirm that. It is the Kips.
It's the Kips. So, we've entered Kips territory. Yes.
What a great way to atone for all your sins than to listen to a bunch of establishment spokespeople.
Yeah, exactly.
Spread their propaganda on a Sunday, as we're doing on this Monday. So
a great way to atone for your sins is by forcing yourself to watch the sinful corporate media.
There you go. There you go.
And
also just by liking the stream, that's another great way to atone for your
You're
sins.
So right. Yes, That's perfect. Or if you really want to go overboard and be a very observant Jew or very observant Jew ally, do what Andrew Howard did and drop a super chat. That sounded more. I didn't mean that. Did that sound anti-Semitic? Like I was making? No. Actually, I just pushed back against anti-Semitic. Well, all right, maybe if Andrew's Jewish, I did a really good anti-Semitism PR because I just shattered the myth of Jews not being generous, which is a myth. You people who are clipping this, it's a myth. I myself am Jewish, so obviously I'm saying that.
Well, it's nuanced because you're also exploiting a Jewish holiday to ask for a super chat, which offers you financial gain. So really, ultimately,
I know. So I'm perpetuating anti-Semitism. Yeah. But if Andrew's Jewish, then it's a wash. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. But
Andrew, show us your penis. That's the only way to find out. Yeah.
I mean, in the great words of Larry David.
Yeah.
You want me? What you want to see my penis?
Can you super chat dick pics on YouTube? I'm not sure if you can do that or not.
Now we're perpetuating misogyny, exhibitionism, violence, literal violence.
It's the only way. It's the only way. I'm trying to resolve whether or not we're being anti-Semitic.
I know. And Jonathan Cadman is saying, I tip generously when I go out to eat. So, and that, speaking of tip, all we're asking is just the tip. That's all we're interested in seeing. So is that a dick pic if it's just the tip? It's just the tip pic. Unclear. So many questions in the great Jewish tradition of the skeptical, questioning rabbi. We are perpetuating that great rabbinical tradition.
Yeah.
So yeah, Nathan Sutton here, just so we know, circumcised gay here won't work. It can be misleading. Not sure what the gay has to do with it. Although I'm happy about that part, but I don't know what that has to do with the whether it'll work. But it is true. Oh, Goy! Circumcised Goy here. Thank you, Matt Wilson, for displaying it, because when I read it not on full font, I ocularly challenged you here. Yeah.
Well,
with that amazing, we like to say, this is your one-stop shop for political analysis, weather reports, and now
religious content. We do religious stuff. Yeah.
This is the midrash.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, please remember to like the stream. And also, as always, you can go to usefulidiots.podcast.com to support the show and get bonus content.
Yes. All right. So let's go to our first clip, which is, of course, we may not have Chuck, but we still do have Meet the Press.
The Press with Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. Here in Washington, dysfunction is on full display. The federal government is careening toward a shutdown just 1 week from today with no deal in sight. As one top House Republican lawmaker told me overnight, quote, "It appears that's where we're headed," as hardline Republicans dig in on their demands for deep spending cuts, while threatening to replace Speaker McCarthy, who warned this week they want to, quote, "burn the whole place down." Democratic Senator Bob Menendez is resisting calls to resign after being indicted for allegedly taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes to benefit the Egyptian government. Prosecutors releasing stunning photos, including wads of cash they found stuffed into a monogram jacket when they searched the Menendez home, gold bars, and a Mercedes-Benz. The indictment appears to undercut Republican allegations of a two-tiered system of justice, but it could also make it more difficult for Democrats to make a contrast with former President Trump, who's been indicted 4 times.
I have to say, in defense of Republicans, Democrats still have a long way to go to catch up for all the charges and cases that Republicans got. Remember, this guy, Trump, got framed as a Russian asset and investigated for 2 years. And, I happen to think that's a pretty big miscarriage of justice. And in the case of Bob Menendez, it's pretty hard not to indict the guy. I mean he's obviously so flagrantly corrupt that you'd have to be really extremely biased to not indict him. When you have gold bars in his house, you have wads of cash, you have apparently envelopes that contain the cash with the fingerprints of the people who bribed Bob Menendez found inside Bob Menendez's home. And amazingly, this is Bob Menendez's second case. He caught a first case years ago over corruption. It ended in a hung jury. And rather than saying to himself, you know what, wow, I dodged a bullet there, I'm going to take it easy now, he apparently went right back to it.
Yeah, it's really, it's a miracle. The fact that he hasn't been indicted more frequently, the fact that he isn't in jail, it really shows a lot of grit on his part. He's very hardworking in his grift. He's got gritty grift. And it reminded me of, he has a Mercedes-Benz and gold bars. It reminds me of that great Janis Joplin song, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz and gold bars?" He just heightened that song. Janis
Joplin had foresight.
She did, yeah. And great music, great songs. Are you a fan, Aaron?
Of Janis Joplin? Yeah. I'm not too familiar with her catalog, but one time in the Chelsea Hotel, I was in her former recording space.
Whoa, that's really cool. Yeah.
So that's my brush with rock royalty. Yeah.
I really like her, and her music is one of the few things that I like the first time I've heard it, which is rare for me. But anyway, this Menendez thing is like you can't make it up. But yeah, and his daughter has a show. Speaking of media,
that is very awkward. His daughter is a host on MSNBC.
Yeah,
which is the Democrats' official state media channel. Right. But this case is so flagrantly corrupt, they have to cover it.
Right.
And it's awkward. It's awkward.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you have state TV. You're going to have, relatives of members of the state hosting your shows, and things like this happen.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Yeah. I did notice someone was filling in for her the other day. So.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Well, that's got to be an awkward time.
Yeah, I know.
And it's not
her fault. It's not her fault.
Her father's sins aren't her fault. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Just makes it a little awkward. Yeah. And
I'm sure she sucks anyway, but that's not related to who her father is.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying that based on the fact that she's an anchor on MSNBC.
Right. Yeah. Nothing personal. Yeah.
Not personal. Okay. Let's get back to Meet the Press.
Oh, great. With the cornster.
In just days, Mr. Trump's Republican rivals will try to make their own contrast at the second Republican debate at the Reagan Presidential Library. But is it too late to break through?
We got another GOP debate coming up this week. That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Very exciting. I'll be doing a live stream of it. And if,
as everybody competes to basically become either Trump's vice presidential nominee or just sells whatever brand they're concocting for their next move, because it looks pretty clear that Trump is going to be the nominee according to all the polls.
Right.
And speaking of polls, Steve Kornacki has some polls for us, and they're not looking very good for our president, Joe Biden.
And you'll never guess what he's about to say. You'll never guess. It's a total surprise. All right.
Of job, it's a simple question of job approval. Barely 40% approve of Joe.
Oh, and this is the Steve Kornacki, the cornster. I just gave him that name. I actually kind of like him. He's very entertaining, and he's very animated when he points to maps, or as we'll see here, percentages. Okay.
I just categorically dissed MSNBC anchors. Let's make an exception for Steve Kornacki.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a hard worker. He's great with the polls, like the live polls. And apparently there's rumors And I don't want to blow up his spot, so I could be wrong. There's rumors he's a secret Bernie bro. There's rumors of that.
Wow.
Yeah, rumors.
No wonder. I didn't even know that, and I had a soft spot for him. Wow.
I'm just, this is pure gossip, pure rumors.
Right.
I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Don't
tell TMZ yet.
Yeah. Don't tell MSNBC.
Yeah, you're right.
He'll get canned.
Don't tell MSNBC. Yeah.
Performance.
And we have to note 56%. That's the highest disapproval rating for President Biden since he took office. That's significant.
Yeah, so let's take a look at what's driving that too here. In one big area, no surprise, it is the economy. Look at this contrast. This is April of 21, months after Biden took office. Nearly half the country was satisfied with where the economy was then. Now, barely 1 in 4 Americans satisfied with the economy. There's also this. We found an enthusiasm gap between the two parties. We ask folks on a scale of 1 to 10, how enthusiastic are you about the presidential election? And you can see Republican to Democrat, there is a gap right there. Where's the lag for Democrats? We found a couple places. Non-white voters, you could see significantly less enthusiastic than white voters. And then how about this age gap? The youngest group of voters who Democrats have been trying to get excited and motivated, nearly 50 point gap there.
So really an uphill battle to try to make sure voters don't stay home if you're Democrats.
Yeah, that's it. And the problem for Democrats, too, the lack of enthusiasm about the election, there's clearly a lack of enthusiasm about the president himself, because we asked primary voters on the Democratic side, do you want options next year besides Biden? 59% said yes, they do. This is not a normal number for an incumbent. We asked the same question a year before Donald Trump's.
Which is why, not to sound like a broken record, why this very network, of course, responds to what the people want and responds to normal democracy by airing people who are running against Joe Biden, which is why you see Cornel West, Marianne Williamson, RFK Jr. Never.
But you do see a
Dean
guy
Phillips.
named Dean Phillips.
Dean Phillips, yeah.
Dean Phillips, who's not running but wants someone else to run. And because he's not actually running against Biden, then they allow him on TV.
Yeah.
Not the people who are actually running against Biden,
Right.
like
Yeah,
Cornel West
exactly.
and Mary Wilson. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But they also do ask Joe Manchin like every time he's on. So they are pushing. They're pushing. They just aren't pushing to actually have people actually already running against him.
Yeah. No. But it sounds like the Joe Biden strategy of putting out campaign ads trumpeting the fact that he went to Ukraine during the war, even though that was like a carefully staged photo op and they told Russia ahead of time. It sounds like that is not landing with voters. It's not helping with the enthusiasm. So maybe they can come up with something else. Yeah.
Crazy. All right, let's hear what the Republican is doing.
Sought re-election of Republicans. Only 37% wanted more choices then. That's a very high number.
Yeah, this is like
so like they're happy with their Jesus, that's so crazy. That is pretty crazy. That Trump is so much more popular among his people than I guess it's not crazy. It's not crazy. It's predictable, but it is a total reversal of popularity among their each party.
The inverse of each other, these two numbers.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it raises the question, too, what else concerns Democrats? And I think this gets to sort of the elephant in the room here. Biden's age and fitness. I mean, look at this contrast. We have talked so much about Donald Trump, the indictments, the legal woes. They are clearly a major or moderate concern to the majority of Americans. But Biden's age and fitness for office, almost 3 out of 4 in our poll. This is Democrats, Republicans, independents say it's a major or moderate concern for them. How about Trump? He's only a few years younger than Biden. A full 27-point gap right there. This is looming as a major problem for the president, too.
It's notable because his strategy is.
Well, I mean, fair enough. I mean, Trump has kind of shown that he's indestructible. He has a terrible diet. He's not very healthy. Right. But yet he just keeps on going. He hasn't, certainly Biden, you can't say the same thing. Cognitively, he's not fully there. Yeah. But that's another case where, Kornacki sort of mentions it in passing. Like, we focus a lot on Trump's indictments, but yet that's not voters' top concern.
Right. And it probably helped. And it's, as we've pointed out so many times, it probably helps him among some voters because he looks that much more, if you think he's being persecuted, then it's more evidence of that. Yeah.
But shockingly, most people don't care as much about January 6th and classified documents.
Right.
as much as MSNBC anchors do. So
yeah, and
maybe
it's
there'll be some
funny.
lessons learned from that.
It's funny. They literally, I mean, this is not news, this story. I mean, they have the stats, but every time we tune in to Meet the Press or these shows, but especially Meet the Press, they're telling us how unpopular Biden is. It's just like this week in Biden's unpopularity. And I'm not saying that it's not relevant information, but it is interesting how frequently they do it. Even though they're also official state media, as you point out, official Democratic Party state media. But you think that maybe they're turning on him, huh, Aaron?
Well, there have been signs. David Ignatius, who's a very well-connected columnist for the Washington Post, wrote a column recently saying that he thinks Biden should not run. Right. And they want to win. And when polls keep showing he's a liability, that's naturally going to lead to some chatter. But the problem is who would take his place. They're not sure of that. Right.
And Claudia de la Cruz, I should also mention, is now running with the PSL for president.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Another, but I don't expect her.
Another you will definitely never see on Meet the Press.
Wouldn't that be amazing if next week she comes on?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have some more polls, and they're also not good for Joe Biden.
Spoiler alert.
Let's dig into this more with our political director, Rick Klein, here with the breakdown to help make sense of this poll and dive into the numbers. And Rick, the economy is clearly at the top of voters' minds.
Yeah, Martha, these numbers are simply staggering for the sitting president. 44% of people in this poll say they are not as well off as they were at the start of the Biden administration 2.5 years ago. Those are the worst numbers that we've seen in our ABC News Washington Post polling. It's a question we've been asking going back to the Reagan administration. And when you dive into the big questions around the economy, we know President Biden has been out there trying to make the case. Unemployment is low. He's been talking about how inflation has been easing, but people aren't buying it. You covered some of the reasons why: gas prices, food prices, grocery prices, and the like. Right now, on the big picture on the economy, 74% of the country, that's about 3/4 of Americans, who say the economy is either not so good or downright poor.
But 100% of millionaire cable news pundits tell us every week that the economy is doing great. So I don't get it.
That these people are experiencing a disconnect. It's not the media, but the actual people.
So who should we believe? Should we believe 74% of the country or 100% of millionaire cable news pundits? I don't know. It's a toss-up.
It's a toss-up. Yeah, it's a hard one. Yeah.
It's 50-50. All right, more from this poll.
It's not just the state of the nation or the policies that are giving people pause on President Biden. It seems to be the man himself.
Yeah, Martha, let's talk about age, because we know for sure that the country certainly is.
Let's talk about age, baby. Let's talk about anyway.
And me,
That's a throwback.
Make sure that you're
President
recording
Biden
these,
would be
Wilson, remember, we do want to do a mashup, a music mashup. So please jot down that we've done Janis Joplin and Salt and Pepper
for our future compilation of Useful Idiots musical numbers. Yes. This is gonna be a big hit.
Yeah.
2 years old on Inauguration Day 2025. That's how old he is. He's not getting any younger. And of course, perceptions around his ability to perform in the job are not getting any better. Right now, 3/4 of Americans, 74%, say that he is too old to effectively serve in a second term. That compares to about 50% who say the same around Donald Trump. And it's not just Republicans or independents who are skeptical over Joe Biden. This is a question we asked: should Biden be at the top of the ticket? 62% of Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents said they think that someone else should be the presidential nominee.
Look at the graphic they have. They don't have Cornel West in there, which is, erasure. They have Kamala, Bernie, Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom, claims he's not running.
Right.
Bobby Jr. and Marianne Williamson.
I mean,
let's get Cornel West in that graphic too.
Yeah, and Claudia.
And Claudia for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is funny to see their faces, though. Like,
it's true. It's a rare acknowledgement that there are people challenging Biden. That's true.
Yeah. And Bernie isn't running either, someone points out, which is true. Yeah.
Right.
The party is deeply split on who that someone else should be. Now, if you're looking for a potential good sign, a positive sign for Democrats in this poll, opposition to the Supreme Court's decision on Roe versus Wade overturning abortion rights at the national level remains very, very strong. 64% opposition. Of course, it was Donald Trump's 3 Supreme Court justices who authored that opinion and made it possible.
And of course, abortion played a big role in last year's midterms, but most of these numbers paint a bleak picture for President Biden's reelection chances, Rick.
Yeah, and Martha, maybe the most startling number in our poll is this, the hypothetical matchup, a rematch of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Our poll with the Washington Post pegging this at 51% for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. That is a 9-point edge. Now, that's only a couple of points difference from our last poll in May, but it is significantly different than most recent polls. It is an outlier.
I mean, that's brutal. This poll shows Trump 9 points ahead of Biden. And you know, it's still early, but that's got to cause at least some alarm inside the Democratic Party. Right. So we'll see. But that's not a good number at this point for Biden, when Trump, despite all the cases he's caught, despite the fact that he was a pretty unaccomplished president, like what did he get done? He got a tax cut for the wealthy.
Right. Aaron, you shouldn't dismiss that. That was pretty huge.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, he certainly doesn't have a lot to run on in terms of his own accomplishments, right, and yet leading Biden by 9 points in this poll, at least. I mean, you know, I'm sure some people will argue that this poll is wrong, blah, blah, blah. We'll see what others say, but it's something. Okay, well, let's turn to...
Oh, yeah. Guys, this is, sit. Buckle your seat belts.
Let's turn to AOC, who was on Face the Nation, said a lot of really interesting things, including talking about the surge of migrants at the border. And she made a point that really needs to be said every single time, drawing a connection between U.S. sanctions that are designed to destroy economies, like the economy of Venezuela's, and how that causes migration.
And which is more proof that she obviously watches Useful Idiots, because we make this point all the time. So thank you, AOC. Thank you, Alexandra.
I definitely think that we need to have comprehensive immigration reform so that we aren't constantly doing this patchwork policy extensions. That has not happened for decades. But additionally, I think we also need to examine the root of this problem, because if we are constantly...
Katie, you're muted.
Sorry, I blew my nose and forgot to unmute. Reminder that Kamala Harris is always talking about the root causes, but unlike AOC, she actually never talks about sanctions. So it's interesting. Maybe Kamala Harris should be watching us more, or listening to AOC at the very least.
Engaging in foreign policy that drives people to our southern border. In this specific instance, U.S. sanctions that were originally authored by Marco Rubio began and precipitated, certainly took a large part in the driving of populations to our southern border. Shortly after those sanctions, those broad-based sanctions...
You're talking about Venezuela.
Yes. Shortly after those broad-based sanctions were enacted, we started seeing dramatic increases in these populations that were coming to our southern border. And so we have to address the root of these population movements and the migration crisis, and we also have to address the domestic U.S. policy issues when it comes to immigration reform.
But you know, the Maduro government has also been responsible for large parts of that. Are you saying that you want to?
So that's AOC, of course, not willing to point out that when you go all the way with her analysis, she's correct. She correctly points out that U.S. sanctions led to the crippling of Venezuela's economy as intended and forced people to flee. And of course, the anchor has to go in and blame the bad guy government, the Maduro government, which the U.S. is trying to overthrow. Trump launched a coup there in 2019. The Democratic Party supported it. And of course, Maduro has to be demonized. So the anchor says, well, of course, Maduro is responsible. No, governments don't deliberately destroy their economies and force people to flee. These sanctions destroyed Venezuela's oil industry, which is its main way of raising revenue. So predictably, the country was decimated. And AOC, of course, has to accept that talking point there rather than pushing back on it. But at least she's making the point that sanctions, as designed, hurt the economy. Right. And that's better than anybody else
Yeah, and you never get this on mainstream television.
Yeah, and it's important. And of course, well, let's continue with this clip.
Yeah.
You want the Biden administration to pull back pressure on him?
I think we need to re-examine the nature of these sanctions. There are sanctions that are very specific. For example, the Magnitsky Act sanctions that do actually focus on the decision makers and people who may be violating norms, practices, civil rights. But broad-based sanctions that punish the overall economy and harm everyday working people that are driving them into the economic and political destitution that force millions of people, both not just to the United States, but even to our regional partners.
So, I mean, she's right there about the broad-based sanctions, but then she's trying to find some wiggle room and saying we should still have some targeted sanctions. Right. And she mentions the Magnitsky Act. The problem is that even these so-called targeted sanctions still have a deterrent effect, because big companies see these sanctions on government officials, and then they get scared off because they don't want to get hit with possibly secondary sanctions by working with these people. So even when you supposedly have targeted sanctions, you're still hurting the overall economy. And there's a Venezuelan economist, Francisco Rodriguez, who is he hates the Maduro government, not a fan of them at all. But he's pointed out that these so-called targeted sanctions have had that impact. And by the way, they didn't just begin under Trump and Marco Rubio. They began under Barack Obama. President Obama, declared Venezuela to be an extraordinary national security threat to the U.S. For some reason. Somehow Venezuela was threatening U.S. national security under Obama. And when you do stuff like that, you scare off businesses from working there. Yeah. So Obama actually began it, and Trump and Bolton and Mike Pompeo and Marco Rubio took it to a new level. But Democrats are responsible here as well.
Yeah. And of course, Biden, like in the case of Cuba, he reissued so many of these sanctions. We talked about his travel ban against North Korea on a recent episode with Amanda Yee. And this is yet another example of Biden perpetuating things that some people consider Trumpian, and more proof that nothing would fundamentally change. The one campaign promise Biden has kept, which happened to be made to donors behind closed doors. Yeah.
Yeah. And so AOC, her comments, in my opinion, totally welcome. It's great to see, but it also shows the constraints that exist on dissent inside the establishment, where even in voicing criticism of U.S. policy, you still have to cater to many of the underlying talking points that justify it.
Right.
And so it doesn't have to be that way, but at least, whatever, to her credit, at least she said something about the sanctions and how catastrophic they are. That's better than anybody else on these shows.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, we're at 1,500 watching, which we salute you for. But where are the likes? Where are the likes? The likes.
The likes are at 531.
Oof.
Guys, this is pathetic. Let's get to at least 600. I should be pausing it until we get to 700, but I'm being generous. Guys, are you not trained? We tell you this every week. What do we have to do to make you like? We know you're not all hate watching. Not all of you.
I don't know. The live show just might have a lot of hate watchers. It's our non-lives who then come through afterwards with the likes. We're counting on you, but
listen to Anna Franklin. She gets it. Smash the like.
We're almost at 700 now. That was a good jump.
Oh, good. So maybe if I under push people, then they come through. I'll be like, we better get to 450. Yeah. Where are we at? Is it true? Are we at 900? Someone wrote 900.
I see 731.
Wow.
All right.
What a rally.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it. And for that, you know what we're going to give you? More AOC.
So AOC was just talking about sanctions and how they destroy economies like Venezuela and governments that the U.S. wants to overthrow. And the person in Congress who is in the lead in being passionate about sanctioning countries that the U.S. wants to overthrow is Bob Menendez. When he's not accepting bribes and gold bars and stuffing them into his wife's luxury gowns in his home. He's dreaming about ways he can deny food and medicine to children in Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, Syria, and any other global South country that the U.S. wants to destabilize. And so Bob Menendez has now been indicted for corruption. AOC has come out and said he should resign.
Yeah, more gems from AOC.
Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, as you know, has just been indicted on bribery charges. Should he resign? And what do you think of his statement that it has to do with him being a Latino?
Well, you know, I think the situation is quite unfortunate, but I do believe that it is in the best interests for Senator Menendez to resign in this moment. As you mentioned, consistency matters. It shouldn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. The details in this indictment are extremely serious. They involve the nature of not just his, but all of our seats in Congress. And while, you know, as a Latina, there are absolutely ways in which there is systemic bias, but I think what is here in this indictment is quite clear. And I believe it is in the best interest to maintain the integrity of the seat. I want to emphasize that all people they must be extended the presumption of innocence until proven guilty.
Sure, those gold bars could be purely decorative. Yeah.
Well, and he's facing more and more calls to resign, which of course he won't. He is going to stand firm in his position because why not? He had a hung jury in his last corruption case, and there are more children who need to be denied food and medicine in global South countries. So how could Bob Menendez resign?
It's true. When
the job is not finished, there are more sanctions to impose on bad guy countries.
And it's interesting if we're talking about like identity and identity politics, systemic bias. I don't think we're seeing him face that. I don't think he's being persecuted for being a Latino in this case. Yeah. All righty. More AOC, guys, but now we're going to get to labor politics.
UAW's president, when he was with us last week, said, when I asked him why the union hadn't yet endorsed President Biden, he said that has to be earned. That sounds like.
And remember, we went over this last week. She was absolutely disgusted. Visually, you could see it in her face. She was like, what's it going to take? What's it going to take? She was very annoyed that that United Auto Workers President Sean Fain was not already giving him Biden his endorsement. Okay, so let's see what else she has to say.
That sounds like he's disappointed that party leadership is not doing as much as they could. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it always has to be earned. And President Biden showing up to the picket line on Tuesday is a historic event. We have never seen in modern history a president show up to a picket line like this. And I think it should be earned. It needs to be earned. And I believe that President Biden is working towards that, especially when he lands in Michigan on Tuesday to earn that. You know,
and that's true. Biden has announced he's going to join the picket line at this UAW strike in Michigan, which is significant. It is happening after Trump said he was going, although I doubt Trump is actually going to the picket line, because now it's Trump's turn to pretend once again that he's a pro-labor champion as he did in 2016.
Yeah.
Only to appoint a cabinet full of billionaires and appoint a really awful NLRB, and of course do nothing to support unions, at least that I can remember from when he was president. But it's a good sign that both these presidential candidates, Trump, Biden, feel the need to go and show their solidarity with workers. That's encouraging. And, you know, for all the criticism I've had of Bernie Sanders, him bowing to the establishment on the proxy war in Ukraine especially, and not doing, I think, much with his movement, this like revolution he built up. I do think you can credit him for some of this. The fact that now leading politicians feel the need to actually speak the language of worker solidarity. You didn't have that a few years ago, and I think you can credit at least Bernie, at least partially, for that.
Yeah, he shows up a lot of picket lines. Yeah,
he does.
Yeah, before it's cool. And shout out to AOC. I mean, I don't think she applies that logic to the presidential election, but shout out to AOC for acknowledging that things do have to be earned and they're not automatic. I think a lot of people have a problem with that. Yeah.
Well, for a different take, here's Donna Brazile, former chair of the DNC, who says that Biden has nothing to prove because he's always been pro-worker.
Yeah.
This striking. Donna, we've also got these striking auto workers this week. President Biden is going to go out and join the picket line. Pete Buttigieg said, he's just siding with workers. But historically, I don't think that's really ever happened before.
First time ever that a president, but look, he's probably...
Is he making the right move?
Absolutely. He's a pro-union president. He has always sided with working people, and this year alone, he has helped to avert strikes in other major industries. But what I want to say is that
helping avert a strike is not necessarily the most pro-worker thing to do, especially the way that he did it. Remember, Obama left his mansion in Martha's Vineyard to convince the NBA not to go on strike. I guess he was helping them avert a strike also.
Yeah, and in Biden's case, the major example of him averting a strike was when he ordered unions, railway workers not to strike. He basically broke their strike and ordered them back to work.
Yeah, so he's a strike breaker.
Yeah, that is Biden's way of averting a strike and being pro-union is ordering unions not to use their leverage and strike.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Donna.
These workers have been.
Yeah, that's enough from Donna Brazile. We just wanted to hear her talk about what a great champion of workers Joe Biden is.
Yeah. Does she know about the railroads? Does she know? Has she heard about them?
Yeah, it's old news. It's only it was last year. We've moved on.
Yeah. Oh, this is a great clip coming on. So we're gonna have some Peter Alexander is going to try to do his best, and he's an NBC news chief, White House correspondent. He's going to try to do his best to do some sleuthing. Let's hear what he had to say on Meet the Press about Shawn Fain, who again is the president of the UAW, and he is a a member of the reform movement. He won an election, and he instituted one worker, one vote, as opposed to letting the higher ups decide things. He's really helped democratize the union. So let's hear what they have to say about him.
Point that Amna's Peter, I should say, to the point that Amna's making about UAW. Yeah. Here you're going to have this split screen with President Biden in Michigan and then former President Trump on Wednesday in Detroit. He's trying to counter-program the GOP primary debate, but talk about the politics of this decision to go, because some union workers on the front line say, don't turn this into a political event. We want a deal.
Well, Democratic officials, we should say, NBC News has learned, had invited President Biden to come out on Labor Day to first make a visit. The president balked at that, is now going to be going after Shawn Fain, the UAW president, invited him. The key takeaways here are a couple. One, the White House is still trying to figure out exactly who the UAW president Shawn Fain is. The president doesn't have a long relationship with him. He's a Bernie progressive, right? So it's made it a little bit more complicated. When the president gets out there this week, though, when you speak to
he's a Bernie progressive.
He's a Bernie progressive.
He stands for the basic rights of workers. He wants them to be treated fairly and given good wages, which makes things more complicated.
Yeah. What are you going to do with that? Yeah.
Yeah. He's basically not an inherent Democratic Party shill who will just pretend, who will just worship Joe Biden and help boost his election campaign. He's actually interested, apparently, in the plight of his workers, not Biden's re-election chances. So it's complicated. And we have to figure out who exactly this guy is.
Yeah.
And it's funny.
Yeah.
That's a good detail that Biden initially turned down the workers when they were first invited.
Yeah. On Labor Day of all days.
On Labor Day. But then, what happened since then? Trump said he was going. Yeah. And I don't know. That sounds to me like that might have been the clincher. Not Joe Biden's devout pro-worker views. As much as
commitment to workers.
Tell us otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's see what else this guy, Pete, has to say.
Allies, as I have in the last couple of days, they say two things. One, this is the most obvious thing for the president to do. This is core to who he is. But two, they also acknowledge there's a bit of a risk here, because by going to the picket lines, as he plans to do, you also potentially own the outcome here. And if it's not the one that the UAW workers like, perhaps it could be a problem. It is a delicate, tricky political scene for him.
Fascinating.
So you hear that? this is core to who Biden is. So of course he's going to go to the picket line. But he
Point
just
that
said
Anna
that.
is making about.
Oh, sorry about that. All right, yeah.
But he just said that when he was invited a few weeks ago for Labor Day, he said absolutely no way. He balked. So
Well,
which is it?
you can't wear white after Labor Day. So for Biden, you can't show up to a protest before Labor Day.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, right.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, it's not about a lack of commitment to workers.
Or on Labor Day.
Or on Labor Day, right? Exactly. Yeah, right. On Labor Day, yeah. And by the way, I still love the way that they have to figure out who the Sean Fain is. Like, they can't actually conceive of someone who represents workers' demands.
Yeah.
They can't see him as the head of an organization. This is all about, he's like some celebrity leader. It's not about an organization with goals. And also, when they're saying, what is he about? He's been so clear on what the demands are. If they want to know what this is about, the workers through this union, this more democratized union, is making it very clear. Their demands are very clear. It has to do with wages. That has to do with hours per week. It has to do with getting rid of tiers, which creates a lot of animosity among workers because they are doing comparable things. You know, it lends itself to workers kind of like blaming each other or having resentment towards each other as opposed to the bosses. So all these people need to do is actually listen to, you know what, you want to find out about Sean Fain? Listen to him. Radical idea.
Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on, Sean Fain? That's what the Biden administration is asking. Are you with us or are you with the workers? That's pretty much the question that Sean Fain needs to answer.
Yeah.
And we're going to find out. We're going to find out. Okay, well, looming over all this is the possibility of a government shutdown because Republicans are engaged in their standard infighting. And however you feel about Republicans and however you feel about the demands of the, faction of the Republican Party that is holding up a government spending deal, at least they're offering us some drama and some infighting and some conflict that Democrats are not giving us. So here is a ringleader of the Republican rebels, Matt Gaetz, speaking to Fox News about why he is revolting against Speaker McCarthy.
And he is revolting, but
Matt Gaetz, Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman, thank you very much for being here this morning.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I get to respond to your monologue, because if you're saying that I'm standing in the way of all the Republican wins, I'd love you to enumerate them. Watching my friend and mentor Jim Jordan, it was quite painful because he started by saying we should only pick one fight, the border. But then as the interview went on, he said, well, we should pick a second fight, Jack Smith. And by the time the interview rounded out, he was saying that we shouldn't be funding Ukraine without a plan. And yet the very continuing resolution that you and Jim Jordan seem to be for continues to have $300 million more for Ukraine. So I think we ought to fight on all fronts. I think the border is very important. And the best way for us to advance the Republican border policies is to pass the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, do that along with veterans, defense, ag, state and foreign ops. We'll have 73% of the discretionary budget funded. And if, the Department of Labor and Education have to shut down for a few days as we get their appropriations in line, that's certainly not something that is optimal, but I think it's better than continuing on the current path we are to America's financial ruin.
Congressman, I understand, and that is why you are on this program this morning, because I want to give you a fair shot, and I want to get you heard. So tell me why you are threatening Speaker McCarthy and trying to shut down this government at a time that the Republicans have finally gotten some upper hands here in terms of wins, able to investigate President Biden on what looks like bribery.
Yeah, we don't put our pencils down in the investigation of President Biden during a shutdown, so the premise is false. Second, if Kevin McCarthy was actually serious about pursuing the Bidens, he would have sent Hunter Biden a subpoena by now. That's how you know this is sort of failure theater that you're observing. During the first year of Democrat control of the Congress, they brought in Donald Trump Jr. 3 times over a nothing burger. And so we seem to be fundamentally unserious in our oversight. But what is serious is the fact that we are spending more than $7 trillion a year, bringing in around $5 trillion a year. And I want to fund the government. I'm not pro-shutdown, but the way to fund the government is not the same way we've been doing it since the mid-90s, where it's...
All right, so we get it. And look, this very well could lead to a shutdown, but they're giving us some drama. And they're giving us some infighting, which Democrats don't give us. So,
And a lot of people have pointed out in the comments that he looks like Beavis or Butthead. And it's true. I've never seen that before. I never realized that before. He does though. Also, you don't agree, or you think?
Well, I saw more the character Quagmire from Family Guy, but
Okay,
I can see, but interesting how all these are cartoon choices.
Right, it's
he
true.
does have kind of a anyway, but
in a more substantive, even more substantive than the Beavis and Butthead comment that I just made. This is a good comment from John Schmidt. Shut down. The reps keep their insurance. The police keep getting paid. The military keeps expanding. The only thing that gets shut down is social services, which is very true. Important thing to remember.
That's a very good point. Okay, well, speaking of government funding and things that won't be impacted, you can be sure that the U.S. is going to keep funding no matter what the proxy war in Ukraine. And here is Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, just back from a trip to Ukraine, on why the war needs to continue.
Ukraine. You just came back from Ukraine, and you met as well with President Zelensky this week here in Washington. Can Ukraine count on that $20 billion that President Biden is asking Congress for?
Well, Margaret, thank you for having me on. This was my second trip to Ukraine. I went in April. I had the chance to meet with commanders, U.S. military commanders, Ukrainian, Polish. The aid that we are giving them is critical. If this was to stop, they would lose and Putin would win. So I am, motivated to get this done in the United States Senate. There's bipartisan support for this in a CR, providing funding for Ukraine. And so, I mean, we've got to get this across the finish line, or this would be a disaster.
Across the finish line.
It doesn't sound like things are going as great for Ukraine as we were told they were. We were told that Russia is losing. In fact, Blinken said that Russia already lost.
Right.
Now, Mark Kelly is saying that unless we give them another $20 billion, that Ukraine is going to lose. And again, we've gone over this, but the U.S. hyped up this counteroffensive, pushed Ukraine into it, even though Ukraine didn't have the proper training and didn't have aerial power, which the U.S. would never, ever do. And a lot of people have died. And so now they need a new injection of money to keep the war going. Because again, the aim is not to defend Ukraine. It's to weaken Russia, as Lloyd Austin put it.
Right.
And they certainly need to keep that going until Biden's reelection in November 2024, because he went all in on this. And any kind of defeat before then would be disastrous for him. It'd be even worse than Afghanistan was for him. So, the plan is basically to keep the war going, just at least through the election. That's as far as I can see it.
Get that cross that finish line, that really bloody, charred finish line. Yeah, it's just disgusting. I mean, at least he's honest. He's honest in his reminder that without U.S. support, this war would end.
Absolutely, and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was at the UN General Assembly in New York last week, and he said that we're still willing to negotiate, but we're no longer going to accept a ceasefire.
Right.
Which is a shift from a previous position when they were talking about ceasefires before. But he said we've learned our lesson, because he mentioned the peace deal that was reached in April 2022 between Ukraine and Russia, which the West sabotaged, according to multiple reports, including from Ukrainian sources and from the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and the Turkish Foreign Minister. And so Lavrov said, we've learned our lesson. We're not going to trust any kind of ceasefire deal. So we're open to negotiations, but not ceasefires, which means it's just a recipe for war. And possibly even Russia is going to launch an offensive of its own, which would be even more disastrous. So it's looking really terrible on top of the horrors of the war.
Right. And it also shows you how strong the propaganda is, that he wouldn't be embarrassed to say what he said about how without us, the war would end.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, somebody we can thank in part for bringing us the Ukraine proxy war is Hillary Clinton, who, of course, presided over a campaign that invented a conspiracy theory that Trump was actually a Russian asset and was installed in the White House by Vladimir Putin and blackmailed with a P-tape to do his bidding. That helped undermine diplomacy with Russia. It helped incentivize Trump and his neocon cabinet to escalate tensions with Russia, to send weapons to Ukraine that Obama wouldn't send because he didn't want to further inflame the war. And so Hillary Clinton now is back speaking still about Russia and how Russia could still destroy our democracy because, of course, rather than reflect on her own failures in 2016, she's still blaming Russia.
Right, because as we know from that book, Shattered, none of which has been disputed. They decided when they realized she was losing, they decided over pizza that they were going to go with. I just realized this is the real Pizzagate, but they decided over pizza in a Brooklyn office that they were going to go with Russia as the reason she lost. Yeah.
Vladimir Putin has obviously your friend and mine.
Yes, indeed.
He has intervened in our election in the past.
Right.
It's not something, as you experienced firsthand, it's not something we talk about a lot. Do you fear?
It's not something it's not something we talk about a lot. I believe it was Hillary Clinton talking to Nancy Pelosi when Nancy Pelosi said all roads lead to Putin, when Hillary Clinton said she wanted to see the phone records, Trump's phone records on January 6th to see if he was talking to Putin about January 6th. Yeah, we never hear about this.
This is an anchor on MSNBC claiming that we don't talk a lot about alleged Russian interference, when this is all MSNBC talked about for years and years nonstop.
Yeah.
It was compared to 9/11. It was compared to Pearl Harbor. It was, it was said that Russia is destroying our democracy through their social media bots and trolls. This is all they talk about. They've moved on a little bit now because now we're talking about a proxy war, which Russiagate helped start. But yeah, that's a really funny comment from Jen Psaki, who admittedly she only joined MSNBC not too long ago, so maybe she's still catching up. But let's hear what Hillary has to say.
That is something that could be happening for 2024. And do you think we should be talking about it more?
Well, I think we should be talking about it more because I don't think, despite all of the, deniers, there's any doubt that he interfered in our election or that he.
Aaron, she's calling us out. We're the deniers.
Yes. Well, we've gone through all the evidence tirelessly, and all the evidence points to exactly what John Durham confirmed in his recent investigation, that the Clinton campaign concocted a scam to frame Trump as a Russian asset, and everybody in the intelligence community, or not, I shouldn't say everybody, powerful people inside the intelligence community went along with it, along with their loyal stenographers in the media. And that's why we have this unquestioned belief that Russia launched this massive interference campaign, and all the evidence undermines that. We don't have to go through it now, but again, and every time there's an election,
the evidence are a bunch of deniers.
Yes, but every time there's an election, they, and Democrats might lose, they roll out this fear mongering. Oh, Russia's going to interfere again. Like it happened before 2020. It happened before the 2018 midterms. But as soon as Democrats actually do not bad, then they forget about this this Russian interference boogeyman. Because in reality, the Russian interference boogeyman is it's the intellectual equivalent of a child fearing a monster under the bed. It's the exact same thing. And we're supposed to pretend it's a very serious threat.
Yeah. Let's hear more from Hillary.
He has interfered in many ways in the internal affairs of other countries, funding political parties, funding, political candidates, buying off, government officials in different places. So that is.
Which we do on a much bigger scale than Russia. Russia certainly does that, but we have more money and more power. So we do that on a much bigger scale. I'd love to compare the budget of how much Russia spends interfering politically in foreign countries and how much the U.S. spends politically. And it's, I bet you what Russia spends is a fraction of what the U.S. spends.
Yeah.
His opus, his opus operandi, in the sense that he hates democracy. He particularly hates the West, and he especially hates us. And he has determined that he can do two things simultaneously. He can try to continue to damage and divide us internally, and he's quite good at it. And sadly, he has a lot of apologists and enablers in our own country, people who either don't see the danger or dismiss it out of hand, or maybe agree with some of the positions he's taken. on certain things, including his barbaric invasion of Ukraine. And so dividing us and then trying to seize territory in such a brutal way to try to expand his reach, to try to restore the Russian empire, if not the former Soviet Union, that is who he is. I said that for years. Part of the reason he worked so hard against me is because he didn't think that he wanted me in the White House. So we are where we are, and part of the challenge is to continue to explain to the American public that, you know, the kind of leader Putin is, this authoritarian dictator who literally kills his opposition, kills journalists, poisons people who disagree with him, invades other country, interferes with our election. That is part of the alternative we have to reject in this election. We have to reject authoritarianism. We have to reject a kind of creeping fascism almost of people who are really ready to turn over their thinking, their votes to wannabe dictators, and we can't allow that to proceed. So I think it's fair to say that you know, you have a tough job because you have to talk about what's happening in the news, but you also have to keep people's eyes on what's right behind the horizon. And I fear that you know, the Russians have proved themselves to be quite adept at interfering, and if he has a chance, he'll do it again.
So this is the Democratic playbook: is constant fear mongering, constant deflection of their own failures, Hillary Clinton's failure to defeat a reality TV show host, and projecting their own policies onto other people, because everything she accuses Russia of is exactly what her and her colleagues have done as well, and in fact in much more destructive ways.
DPB,
And,
DPB, Democratic playbook.
Absolutely. But anyway, great to hear from her, and good to see that she's consistent.
2016 called. They want their talking points back.
Yeah. And by the way, if she cares about attacks on journalists, the first thing she can do is call for the freedom of Julian Assange, which the Biden administration,
I haven't heard her do that.
The Biden administration is persecuting Julian. She once called privately for droning Julian Assange.
Right.
So she could retract that and call for his freedom. That's what she could do concretely to stand up for journalism.
That would be great. Yeah.
All right, we have one more clip. This is former Trump National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, and he is going to respond to this recent development where the U.S. and Iran agreed to mutually release prisoners, and the U.S. also freed up billions of dollars in money that they'd stolen from Iran to help Iran buy some humanitarian goods. And Robert O'Brien is not happy about this deal.
You were the hostage envoy under President Trump before you became his national security advisor, and you did help bring 3 citizens home from Iran. This week, we saw a number of Americans return in a very happy reunion. Siam Aknamazi, Ahmad Shargi, Murad Tabaz. Why wasn't the last administration able to get them out? Why is it so hard to bring home Americans from Iran?
Well, we had unprecedented success in the Trump administration. As you know, Margaret, we brought home over 58 hostages from countries all over the world: North Korea, Iran, Russia. But we had a ground rule: we wouldn't pay ransom. And look, I was so pleased to see Siamak and Murad and the others come home. I felt like I failed them by not getting them home. But we weren't going to pay $6 billion. We were going to pay $1 billion plus per hostage, because
that's an interesting contrast. I feel like I failed them, but at the same time, there was no way I was going to free them. You did fail them, right? Yeah.
That creates a market for hostages. It makes your blue passport worth $1 billion. And so I'm concerned that Americans traveling abroad are going to be targeted by countries like Russia and China and Iran, but also terrorist organizations who know that they can get a big ransom if we pay these sorts of fees. And we just weren't prepared to do it. But we had unprecedented success bringing Americans home from all over the world.
Okay, so what he's saying there is that he's saying that the U.S. paid a ransom to Iran, that they paid $6 billion in ransom money to Iran for the release of these prisoners. It's not what happened. All the U.S. did was stop stealing Iran's own money. That $6 billion was Iran's, and the U.S. stopped stealing it in this case and let Iran have it. But even there with limitations, because it's going to go to a fund administered by Qatar that can only be used for humanitarian goods. So what he describes as paying ransom to Iran is actually stop stealing Iran's money. And the U.S. has stolen plenty of Iran's funds before. In this case, they stopped doing that just to get some prisoners to come home. But note how in his mind, letting Iran access its own money is somehow paying a ransom to Iran.
The other issue, Margaret, is what is Iran going to do with that money? We saw this with the JCPOA. They took that money and they spent it on terrorism and on ballistic missiles and on nuclear programs. I'm afraid they're going to build more drones that kill Ukrainians with the money we just gave them. So I'm thrilled to see Siamak and Murad and the others home, but I'm very concerned about the look of the deal internationally.
Yeah, so again, the money that Iran is getting back, because it's its own money, is going to be used for humanitarian goods. And breaking news, countries spend money on their self-defense, especially when they're being threatened by the world's top powers constantly, the U.S. and Israel. And if the U.S. doesn't want Iran to spend money on weapons, then it should stop threatening it and maybe go back to things like the Iran nuclear deal, which the U.S. tore up. So anyway, that's our neocon insight of the week from Robert O'Brien.
Yeah. Guys, one more reminder. Thank you for coming. Thank you for liking. And if you want to see me in person, we're done, right? That was our last clip that we're showing today?
Yeah.
We went over, I will be screening my documentary, Commie Camp, my award-winning documentary, which Medea Benjamin liked and blurbed and Susan Sarandon liked and blurbed. And that's October 4th at DCTV. You can now buy your tickets. Do that before it sells out. DCTV is in New York City. It's at 87 Lafayette. I put a link in. Also, I'll put a link into the trailer, Commie Camp trailer. And basically the movie in the documentary, I go back to the summer camp that I attended and worked at and my mom did and investigate, whether they're indoctrinating the children as people like Rush Limbaugh allege they are. And there's some interesting alums of Camp Kinderland. A lot of historic people would visit the camp. So like Paul Robeson, the great Paul Robeson visited. There's a playhouse that we named after him. And also Chesa Boudin went to camp, who became the reformist DA of San Francisco, who was the son of whether incarcerated, whether underground people. And also the Rosenbergs, their kids, Robert and Michael Meeropol, who were adopted by Abel Meeropol, who wrote the lyrics to Strange Fruit. He wrote that, the amazing Billie Holiday song. They sent their kids there. You know who else here? I didn't even know this until recently. The guy from Kiss, Paul Stanley, worked at Kinderland. Joey Ramone worked at Kinderland. And the famous Freewheeling album cover with the Bob Dylan one. So where he's like walking with a woman, he has his arm around her. That her name is Susie Rotolo, and she was actually an activist and artist, the daughter of Italian-American working class communists. She helped politicize Bob Dylan, and she went to that camp.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, come be a part of history and check out Katie's film, Commie Camp, screening where and when?
DCTV at 87 Lafayette, Manhattan, 87 Lafayette Street, October 4th. And I'll be there. There'll be a Q&A afterwards. Rachel Meeropol, who's the granddaughter of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg and went to that camp, she will be there doing a Q&A.
All right. All
righty.
Thanks, everyone, for watching the stream, liking the stream. Remember, usefulidiots.podcast.com to get bonus content and support the show. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.